Morning. My name is Shazia Khan, and today's session is on academic writing skills and its learning outcome 2, which is to produce a written response in an appropriate format. Firstly, I'm just going to go through a learning outcome, summarised learning outcome 1, what we did in that. And we looked at learning outcome 1 is we looked at a use of a range of skills and materials to plan a task or an assignment. We looked at what is writing for academic purposes and the 3 purposes of doing an academic piece of work. We looked at interpreting the meaning and implications of specific questions and why they're so important in regards to looking at open and closed questions. We also looked at the different types of academic writing, such as essays, research papers, research proposals, thesis, dissertation, lab reports, literature review. We also identified the structure when you're doing an academic piece of work and how academic writing is divided into 2 types. So you've got the student academic writing, which is used as a form of assessment, primarily at university as well as schools, and the expert academic, which is intended for publications such as an academic journal or a book. We looked at how both types of the writing are expected to adhere to the same standards. We also looked at the characteristics of academic writing together to distinguish it from other forms of writing, such as the structure, the evidenced, critical, balanced, how precise it needs to be, the objectives, and how formal it needs to be. We looked at an example of a question and how it needed to be addressed, and it was about the diagnosis of hypertension, which would have a person attending the GP surgery. We identified appropriate terms and concepts relevant to understanding the specific questions. So we looked at things like what is the importance of having the use of command words and command words such as describe, suggest, explain, analyze, and suggest. So there's different types of words that you could use. We also looked at an example where they looked at the use of command words. Then we went on to look at the list of command words and their meanings, why we use that, such as analyze, assess, compare and contrast, critically examine, define, describe, discuss and evaluate, and looked at the meaning of each one in regards to using them in an academic piece of work. We then went on to look at the Harvard referencing, why Harvard referencing is important, how Harvard referencing is used when you're doing a piece of academic piece of work, how you cite your sources, both in the body of your assignment and the bibliography or reference list at the end. We also looked at the issue in regards to why Harvard referencing system is so important and why there's a need to have the different systems in place. We looked at also these tools that are available in regards to Harvard referencing online, which is they are called the Harvard referencing generators, which automatically generates the formatted academic references in the style. So it'll put the dots and the commas and things in the right place. So then you can use that for your bibliography. We also, the whole point of the generator is to ensure that, you know, everything is organized and kept on track. And also the importance of having everything in alphabetical order. Why that is so important in regards to referencing. We also looked at a video on academic writing skills and also a video on Harvard referencing to identify how someone would reference journals, internet sites, publications, and we covered the different types of questions, how to interpret them, and the importance of command words, like I said. And now today we're going to go on to looking at learning outcome 2, which is to produce a written response in an appropriate format. So the indicative content here is firstly planning a written response. So you need to consider the question carefully and the conclusion required. You need to write 3 or 4 key points that support the argument. You need to, for each point, identify 1 or 2 examples from research to support the point. You need to note words or phrases that will be useful at each stage. You need to note the sources used so that they can be acknowledged. You need to write a coherent and logical response. Once the plan is in place and the requirements of the question have been analysed, the learner should ensure that there is a strong introduction which sets out what will be covered, because that's the first thing anyone will read, the introduction, to identify what will be in the piece of work or what you will need to be looking at. You need to ensure that there is a strong introduction, which I identified, begin to structure the key points in a logical way. You need to ensure that each point furthers the argument or discussion, and you need to end with a condition that sums up what has been discussed and answers the questions. You need to look at using a format which is appropriate to the subject. So learners should be able to reflect, select the best format for the topic based on the intended audience and purposes. For example, to inform, to explain, etc. This may be an essay, an investigation, an art or photographic collection. So it could be any forms of work. Then we're going to go on to looking at, there's a video here which we'll look at in regards to the 5 C's of business writing, which we'll look at later in regards to what the 5 C's of business writing are. So in this, you may not be trying to create a wonder of the world, but effective written business communication probably means a lot to you in your job roles. So do humanity proud by keeping the 7 C's. This is the 7 C's, but here we have 5 C's: completeness, conscious consideration, clarity, correctness, and courteous. The 5 C's are clarity, contingency, conventionality, completeness, and conciseness. So this is when you are writing in the business world. So it's very important. They are essential for producing, the 5 C's are essential for producing, the whole point of it is that it's essential for producing good communication and delivering effective communication. So we'll look at the video towards the end. So we've got 7 C's of communication, which are the 7 C's of communication are firstly clear, which is to make objective clear, avoid complex words and phrases, is to be concise, so keep it clear to the point, avoid filler words and sentences, concrete, so it needs to be specific, not vague, use facts and figures to support your messages. Correct, so try to avoid typos, use correct facts and figures and use the right level of language, because, you know, certain people understand a certain level of language. Coherent, does the message make sense? Ensure it flows logically, avoid covering too much. So answer what you are being asked rather than going over and above. Complete, so does the message contain everything it needs to? Include a call to action. And courteous, being polite builds goodwill. Ensure measure is tactful. So the 7 C's of communication, as we've just mentioned, is a checklist to ensure that your communication is effective. We communicate with people every day, both at work and in our personal life. We communicate using a number of different methods. We communicate in a face-to-face, so we communicate face-to-face, telephone, email, instant messenger, letters, reports, meetings, presentations, and more. In order to ensure that you get the right result when you communicate, you need to ensure the communication is effective and clear. And this is where the 7 C's come into place. You need to identify that what you are getting into the individual is clear. And the 7 C's, again, is a checklist for ensuring your emails, presentations are clear, and that the recipient that you are sending these to has a clear message. So firstly, when we look at each one, I'll go through each one in a little bit more detail, because that slide identifies it briefly what each one means. So the first one is clear, and that is clarity. So be clear about the goal of your message and the purpose of the message. Present one idea at a time and making it easier for the recipient to understand. Don't leave them guessing what the message is about and having to fill in gaps themselves. Set a goal or outcome for what you want to communicate and work towards that. Concise, and this is conciseness. So keep it to the point, as we mentioned earlier. Keep it short and simple. Don't use unnecessary words. Use 2 words where 1 will do, or 6 sentences when 3 will do. Don't repeat the same point in different ways. This will also make any communication more engaging and easier to understand. Then you've got concreteness. So be clear, not fuzzy. Ensure there is enough detail to get the message across, but not too much so that the recipient will be lost, and that the message is factual. Adding too much noise around your main points can mean these are missed. Make sure the main points and any conclusions are clear to the recipient. Correctness. Check the information you are providing is accurate and in written communication. Ensure it is free from grammatical errors and spelling errors. Check the technical parts of your content are understandable by the person receiving the information. Preparation will help here to make sure you can be sure about what you are communicating, or a chance to read what you have written. Coherent. Make sure your message flows well and is laid out logically, because that's important for someone to have a look at that. The points you make should all be linked to the main topic and should help you deliver your objective. The objective you originally set out to achieve. Make sure the tone of the message is the same throughout, considering a structure for your communication to help here. Completeness. Ensure the recipient has everything they need to understand your message and take action if needed. If action is needed, ensure your message includes a call to action. Also ensure that there are specific details that are clear and are included. Don't leave the recipient with lots of questions to ask. Think about how would you check for understanding. And if an example would be, you could ask questions to check if they're understanding what you are saying. Then you've got courteous, which is the final one. Courtesy. Your message should be polite, friendly, professional, open, and honest. Think about the message from the recipient's point of view, and you are empathetic towards their needs. This will help you to deliver the message in a way that's easy to understand and buy into. Also, communicating to or writing for the reader can make the communication more engaging. By following the 7 C's of communication, you should find the messages you are delivering more effective. 2.1. Devise a detailed plan for a written response for a specific question. So when you have been given a question to answer, often the most difficult task is working out how to get started. However, this is precisely the time at which you are best placed to create a plan for your answer. We have already gone over to interpret the instructions for answering a question and the meaning of the question, which was learning outcome 1. We need to now turn into a plan. During the planning stage, you should keep a number of key concepts in mind, and these are, firstly, the conventions of the academic writing, the 5 C's. Cohesion, your answer should easily move from one paragraph or concept to the next. Clarity, which is the answer should be written in clear language. Consistency, that the answer should be written in the same style throughout, for example, in note form or in prose form, but not both. Consciousness, the language used should convey the meaning in as few well-used words as possible. Completeness, so include all the relevant information in your answer, and the answer should follow a logical pattern and provide a logical argument. Planning, number 2. Most academic answers will require the following components: an introduction, the main body, and a conclusion. Subjects differ in the way in which essays are developed and arguments constructed. However, the information below is likely to be useful to everyone. So you need to start off with an introduction. Here you will specifically address the question, explain the argument you are presenting, or how you have interpreted the question. The second bit of it is the main body. Here you will describe, define, and develop your argument or set of ideas. This section will be made up of several paragraphs, and you will need to plan the theme of each paragraph carefully and make sure you present your answer in a logical order. Conclusion. Here you will summarize the main points and explain how the arguments and evidence answer the question. Number 3, spidergrams. An alternative way of planning an answer is using a spidergram. Spidergrams are a useful way of gathering together your ideas when answering a question. A spidergram is a planning tool that helps you to group information and ideas so that you have a rough outline of how you want to answer, want your answer to look. And what you want it to contain before you start writing in earnest. An example of spidergram is shown on the side. The spidergram is a simple plan with lines and circles and squares here. So you'll have the question topic, you'll have the idea, sub-idea, and then on each point you'll be analysing what you need to put in there. It's there. Spider diagrams help you to make connections between ideas, explore possible solutions, and visualize concepts that may otherwise be difficult to understand. They allow you to see the bigger picture of a topic or problem and the more specific details. So what you need to be introduced in that. You need to write the main topic in the middle, as we have seen from that diagram, then the page, and then draw a circle around it. Draw lines when your main idea and then leads out to subtopics. The subtopics can be things that you can have with an arrow which identify what you want to use the spider diagram for. Okay. It's a good way for using trying to identify certain things and trying to throw ideas there. There are advantages of spider grams. They are good for generating ideas and working at a speed. There's a disadvantage as well, that they can get messy and difficult to read if you contain a lot of information, and they will probably need to be numbered if they're going to be used in a sequence idea. Use 2.2, use a plan to write a coherent and logical response to the specific question. So describe the possible implications of a diagnosis of hypertension would have on a patient attending the GP surgery. So that would be your main question in the middle. So describe the possible implications. Then you go on to the introduction, the first one, which is information about the relevant conditions, treatments, and implication, the key terms to define in the introduction. Then you would look at the main body, which would be looking at evaluating the implications, what effects you need to discuss here, positive effects and negative effects. Then you need to look at providing a conclusion, which provides an answer to the question without repeating yourself from the introduction and the main body. So it's literally a summary of everything you've done. And then you will have to have a reference list again, which will acknowledge, and that needs to be in any assignment you do. You need a reference list, a bibliography, which acknowledges any sort of sources that you have used to help you with this assignment. So this is the way that this is an example that you would have used. So 2.3 is to present the responses in an appropriate format. Bearing these conventions in mind, we can now create a plan for our work. We will use the example question from section 1. Describe the possible implications a diagnosis of hypertension would have a patient attending their GP's surgery. So introduction, here we would set the scene, explain the term hypertension, explain the incidence of hypertension in the UK. We would explain how many people are treated for hypertension in the UK by their GPs. We would explain what the treatment is for hypertension and what it entails. We would then explain what the long-term implications of non-treatment are. Then the main body of this. Here we were going over the possible impact this diagnosis could have on a patient, positive against versus negative impacts. So the positive one, it allows the patient to have a diagnosis and have the reassurance of being treated. Positive also allows the GP to explain the implications for the patient and allay any inaccurate assumptions. The negative ones is depression as the diagnosis of a chronic disease, and then effects on the individual versus effect on the patient's wider family, social circle, impact on family life, changes in smoking, eating, drinking habits, and the worry for the rest of the family need to take regular lifelong medications and start exercising program with the family. In the conclusion, here we will summarize the preceding paragraphs and give our opinion about what this would be a positive or negative experience, and give suggestions about how the patient experience can be improved here. And we will also provide, like I said, a reference list, which is really important in regards to any assessment that you do. A reference list identifies what sources you have used to complete this essay, and it also identifies the sources are up to date and they need to be put in chronological order. It is very important that the work of others is not directly copied and passed off as your own work. That, in regards to your referencing, is so important because it identifies this as plagiarism, and this is not acceptable. And plagiarism would be going through a software that detects it. So you need to make sure you are using the Harvard system for referencing, which we mentioned in Learning Outcome 1, and the importance of the system in regards to reference any sort of work. and why we use this system to identify what sources we've used. So the references for today's session are, we've used Kaufman 1971 essay examinations, tools for teaching, and also we've used the Davis tools for teaching. What we're going to do now is we're going to watch the video on the 5 C's of a business communication. So just pause this. So after watching this video of the 5 C's of effective business writing, we've identified that a good business letter is always written with the reader in mind. The writer considers the 5 C's of the business writing can help you write effective letters. So you need to make sure that your letter or your work is clear, so that it makes sure your purpose and intent is clear to the reader. Complete, so it includes all the necessary information. It's concise, which includes only necessary and relevant information. It's courteous, so it addresses the reader politely, and it's correct, so you need to look at the correctness of it, that it is what it says in regards to making sure that the message is accurate and, you know, not any grammatical issues. Okay, so we go back to the sources that we've used in response to this. So we've got Tools for Teaching and Essentials of Educational Management by Ebel. So we have on Moodle, there are activities that you can read the activities on page 15 and 19. There's academic writing one, there's bbc.co.uk, which is learning English. If you go onto academic writing there, writing and planning your writing, and there's sources available on bbc.teach.uk, skills-wise, planning your writing. Any issues you've got in regards to this assessment or any sort of questions you need to answer about planning your academic skills, email learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. Also, submission of your assignment to be done on learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. Assignment submission is after 2 weeks of completion of the units, which will be next week. Also, you need to make sure that you are using Moodle for any sort of additional sources that you need to be looking at in regards to completing this bit of the assignment. And next week, in regards to this, please go on to Moodle for any additional reading or any additional sources. And also identifying any sort of references that you can use. Next week, we'll be looking at Learning Outcome 3, and we will also be looking at the assignment session in regards to what you need to include in the assignment before submitting. Any queries or any questions or anything, please email on learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. Thank you for attending today's session. Thank you. Bye.